Let us proceed with our discussions with my personal experience with the literature review. In the previous videos, we mentioned about the important features for the literature review, which I used to remind myself while doing the literature review. It was mentioned that we need to be very patient in doing the literature review. It is not one-time job, and it involves the repeated process. We're going to do the review task by task, one task at a time, refine and further refine our review until it reaches to a level of satisfactory in terms of the quality. Also, we mentioned about the process that I went through while doing the literature review. Again, there will be continuous looping. Many papers will be reviewed. For a single paper, there will be several rounds of review, as we need to do one task at a time, reading and understanding at various stages of the literature review. Normally, we don't expect ourselves to be able to read the papers from the first word to the last, understand everything to the bottom of it, and able to recall everything. This normally will not happen. Therefore, in order to make the review process easier, we will need to break down the task to a manageable level, finishing one task before proceed to another, and later combine everything together to become a complete literature review. There will be stages of understanding. At the early stage, the understanding is limited. The purpose now is to have a quick understanding, and then as you read along, you gain more understanding. Now you look into the in-depth study, and then in the stage of doing the literature review, you will require the specifications, details, as well as the technical aspects. That will be the third round of the review. What you see here, the entire process here is progressive and continuous learning. During the process of learning, it is difficult for us to recall everything. That's why we need to make notes. It doesn't matter if it is very messy, because the informations are scattered at the moment. Different papers have their own way to investigate the research topic. They look into the technical aspect from different perspectives. While doing the literature review, you are actually putting the pieces together so that you gain a thorough understanding regarding the research topic, the current state of art, the fundamental principle behind it, as well as the research gap. It is very normal to have the notes taken to be quite messy. That's why later you will need to do some sorting. Group the points and principles together, and then compare the outcome. This helps us to prevent any bias, as if the theories and principles are valid, normally the researcher will agree each other. It is also possible when some researchers do not agree with the others. Don't penalize yet. You will need to look into the conditions and the parameter studies. Probably there are some differences that may lead to a totally different outcome. If the phenomena is not fully explained within that particular paper, you will need to search for the answer. Having questions and searching for answer is normal in doing the literature review. And as you try along searching for answer, you realize that none of the publications actually answering the relevant issue. Probably this will be the research gap. And then during drafting of your literature review, you also cannot expect yourself to be able to produce a good review paper at one go. There will be numerous rounds of drafting and revising, not only in terms of the sentences. It could also be due to the added informations, as well as the sequence how you disclose informations. While writing for the literature review, you will realize that there are still many questions that you cannot understand yet. There are some aspects still doesn't make sense to you. Then question arise. Then you have to go back and search for the answer from the previous papers. Now the whole thing here is continuously looping until to a stage, either the point of saturations or when all the questions are answered, and until no further or significant corrections required after you have reviewed your writings. By then, your literature review is more or less towards the final version. In our previous videos, we also mentioned about one task at a time. This is referring to the process here. You break down the task to a manageable level. For example, searching for article. You spend some time to search for as many articles as possible through various channels and platforms. At this stage, you just focus on searching for the articles. Once you have a good numbers of the article, you move to the next task. Now you want to do some grouping and sorting of the articles. You can have your own grouping system as long as you understand. This one is easier for you to retrieve the relevant informations when you need them. Then you will proceed with the following tasks. Another meaning of one task at a time, it is also referring to the levels of understanding. At different stages of your literature review, your level of understanding differs. Now your focus of the review, at the early stage it will be more basic, but at the later stage it will become more advanced. This will require you to look the entire process on and off again until you have a more advanced comprehensions about the research topic. In these videos, we're going to further discuss about these levels of understanding and where are the focus of reading that can best help us in quickly acquire what we want from the research papers. This slide summarizes the process here. Again, we are doing one task at a time. At the early stage, we are fresh with the research topic. Now the major focus here is for the comprehension. At this stage, we are looking into the general concept, principles, observations, and findings. With that, you will need to read through many papers, but focus more on the abstract, introductions, and the conclusions. These are the areas which are likely to give you the relevant informations. The three sections here is relatively easy for you to understand, as the purpose here is to make reader to quickly understand the research paper, especially the abstract and the introductions. And then in the conclusions, the researcher will normally emphasize what are the takeaway points that the researcher would like the readers to recall. These three sections should be good enough for you to acquire basic comprehensions regarding the research topic. So, at the level of comprehensions, you will need to read through all the research papers that you have, focusing on these few sections. Make notes as necessary, and then try your best to understand the entire research. Once you find yourself have a good levels of comprehensions, then you may move to the next level, which you would like to know the state of art or the technology and the knowledge. This one is when you want to know more about the current stage of the technology, as well as you want to know the effects of various parameters, what are the factors governing the response, and so on and so forth. This triggers the second round of review. At this stage, you will pay attention in terms of the scope of study as well as the parameters that they study. You may observe this from their methodology as well as the result and analysis. From there, you will see the differences in terms of the focus of the study by different researchers, as well as different parameters studied by different researchers. You know that if a researcher using the traditional methods, especially when it comes to the experiment and testing, the numbers of parameters will often be limited, normally somewhere between 2 to 3 parameters. The more parameters involved, the bigger numbers of specimens and samples. The parameters normally will not be too many, so that it is still manageable by the researcher. But you know that for any technologies or knowledge, there are so many governing parameters. It is nearly impossible for a research paper to cover all the parameters. Now you will have to observe the effects of the parameters and put the pieces together for a thorough understanding regarding the effects of the parameters to the subject that you are studying. The process here, it will be like putting the puzzles together so that you gain a bigger pictures regarding your research topic. Also at this stage, you need to observe the significance of those parameters. Some parameters may not bring to significant effects, while some effects are notable. So at this stage, you are to identify the governing parameters as well as the implications of the parameters and also the significance of the parameters. There may be some parameters not being fully studied. You could consider putting it as the focus of your study. Or you could also observe the principle behind those parameters and then extend them to the other relevant parameters. You know that at the end of the day, you will need to decide on several parameters which you wish to study in your research topic in order to contribute to the body of knowledge. The selected parameters in your study, it could be totally new parameters which has not been studied by anybody, or it could be due to the existing parameters which is still not fully understood by the previous researcher, or the existing parameters where the relevant range of the parameters has not been studied by the other researchers, and so on and so forth. As long as you have something to offer to the body of knowledge. This brings to another purpose of the literature review, which you need to do the literature review to decide on the parameters. And if possible, the parameters that you have selected should give notable influence to the response of the specimen that you are testing. This will increase the levels of confidence in terms of the findings as well as the observations due to the changing parameters. By going through the scope of the study by different researchers and by observing the years of the publications, more or less you will have an idea in terms of the latest development of the technology as well as its evolutions. You may also be able to determine who are the persons first introduce the relevant techniques, theories or principles by looking at the years of publications. Make sure you don't miss this kind of the research study, and you will also notice that many researchers also referring to that person, giving credits to the contributions given by the relevant researcher. And then next level, probably you would like to know more about the details and the specifications, which at the first two levels here, it is still towards the comprehensions and the gaugings of the current technology. Now you want to look into the technical aspects and the specifications. Your task now here is to deal with the methodology, material specifications, testing methods, as well as the analysis approach. This stage here is normally meant for you to have an idea how to carry out your research. You will need to first know how the other people's done their research, what methods was used, what kind of materials used, how they conduct the testing, how do they do the analysis, and so on and so forth. With that, you will look into the methodology and the result and analysis. At this stage here, probably you are focusing in terms of their research framework. What are the stages of the study, their sampling design, the data they have collected, the analysis approach, and so on and so forth. In engineering, the specifications of the materials is important. The properties of the material will ultimately lead to the performance of the relevant specimens if you are doing the experiment. If you need to search for the relevant informations, you may refer to the methodology section. Up to this stage, you have more or less thorough understanding related to the research topic. These are all based on the existing informations. If your literature review only stop at this level, it is not actually a literature review. It is just a summary of literature. The meaning of review here, that means there will be critical inputs, in-depth understanding, synthesis, as well as the mastery of the relevant topic. So your level of thinking should not stop here. You will have to elevate your levels of understanding, digest them, synthesize the knowledge, and then leads to the critical thinkings, hypothesis, novel ideas, and so on and so forth. So we are looking into the in-depth understanding, mastery, synthesis, in-depth discussions, critical inputs, as well as the research gap. This probably it will be the last round of the review process. Now your task here is looking into the first principles, theories, equations, discussions, limitations, and others. In order to have these two trigger, you need to build your fundamentals at this stage in the very solid manner. And this part here will involve a lot of critical thinking, imaginations, forecasting, hypothesis, verifications, questions and answers, and etc. Now you are seeking for more in-depth informations, and you would like to know the critical inputs from different artists. You are consulting their critical advice as well as their professional experience. With that, you can look into their result analysis, discussions, conclusions, limitations, recommendations, and future studies. At this level, your focus is the fundamental and the first principles. This is the level where the knowledge are formulated. It is not just an observations. For example, increasing the diameter of the specimen leads to the increment in terms of the ultimate capacity. This is the observations. Now when you come to this stage, you want to know why does increasing the diameter increase the ultimate capacity? What are the reasons behind it? Is it due to the contact surface area? Is it due to the stress? Is it due to the moment of inertia? And others. For better understanding, let us see the differences between the observations and the fundamental principles. For example, when a concrete fill tube that is made of the steel is wrapped by different materials, one is CFRP, another one is BFRP, the axial capacity increased by 61.4% and 17.7% respectively. This means that CFRP is more effective than the BFRP, as the axial capacity increased more than BFRP. So this is a typical observations. There is a cause and there is an effect. You also see the parametric response. You are changing two different materials. This brings to you two different outcomes. Now the question is, why it is so? This is another example within the similar research topic regarding the concrete fill tube. It was found that high concrete strength increased the axial capacity, which is good to concrete fill tube. However, it leads to lower confinement effectiveness, and also high strength concrete reduce the ductility and the energy absorptions of the specimen. This is a typical observations also. There is a cause and there is an effect. This one is looking on the cause and effects at different perspective. Looking from the perspective of the axial capacity, from the confinement effectiveness, the ductility, as well as the energy absorptions. Now the question is, what governs this outcome? If your literature review only focus on these observations, that means it is basically a summary of the study conducted by the previous researcher. You will need to go and search for the answer. Sometimes the answer may not come together within the same paper. Now you will have to read through the other research paper, see if there is any answer. If you still cannot find the relevant answer, probably you have to ask yourselves what is the first principle behind it, and go and seek for the fundamental research, which sometimes may be beyond the scope of your research topic. There could be possible answers from the other fields of study. Coming back to these situations here, it was realized that the concept is due to the high elastic modulus of the high strength concrete. You know that high elastic modulus will lead to higher resistance of the specimen with a smaller degree of deformations. Now, high strength concrete increase the axial capacity. That one is due to the high ultimate stress of the concrete. However, the confinement effectiveness given by the tube wrapping the concrete reduces because of high elastic modulus leads to smaller expansions under load. This delays the response of the confinement given by the concrete. Now you have questions and you have answer behind it. These are the differences between the observations as well as the fundamental principles. Remember, in our previous videos, we mentioned that the entire process shall end when you have all the questions are being answered, or you reach to the point of saturations. Now, to be more specific, how do you know that your reviews is more or less there? Let me give you an example. If you are able to find the relationships between the parameters at the fundamentals level, more precisely at the properties levels, towards the effects and outcomes to the specimens, and you are able to make sense of those cause and effects, you are more or less there. This is provided that this entire thing here is able to explain all the observations and findings given by the previous researcher. If you find yourself able to come out with solutions that can explain nearly all the observations from the previous researchers, that means you reach to a certain levels of understanding. This will be very helpful to you when you do your own investigations in your research study, particularly for the discussions section. Another one is, based on the amounts of information that you have, as well as the levels of understanding, you are able to come up with any prospects of future studies as the outcome of your personal understanding, forecast, synthesis, and you have a good ideas the current state of the technology, and you can come up with some research gaps. Probably you are there already. Now there is no right answer when you should stop for the literature review. Sometimes it can be due to the constraint in terms of the time. You cannot use up the entire durations of your postgraduate study just for the literature review. In that case, you will just need to try your best to produce as good review as possible for you to kickstart your research. While carrying out your investigations for the research, you do the review at the same time. It is a continuous learning process and should not be rigid to a certain period or certain stage of your postgraduate study. Otherwise, you will find yourself wasted too much time on the literature review, which at the end of the day, not all the knowledge gained are useful for your research. And this probably is the main reason that students find themselves lost doing the literature review. My recommendations to you here is for you to gain a basic understanding. Once you have decided the major directions of your research, particularly your parameters that you intend to study, as well as the methodology and the analysis approach that might be involved with your research study, you can actually start doing your investigations, which can be experimental study, survey study, numerical study, and etc. While doing those investigations, allocate some time for you to continuously learn from the literature. As you carry out the investigations, you gain a clearer picture what you need in completing your research. Then you will skew your reviews towards the directions, seeking for information that you need for you to complete your research. The process is long. You need to be patient. Do one time at a time. Don't be discouraged. Don't panic. Always focus on the main directions, seeking for answers and solutions during the course of conducting research. With that, this shall help you getting through the postgraduate studies. All the best and good luck.